Hello and welcome to the show. Now, there are a great many hypercars when it comes to Forza Horizon for these massively fast, unbelievably expensive road vehicles that, I'll be honest, I've tended not to use a huge amount. We don't get amazing racing, normally at least, when you drive cars this fast. You just don't often get very close battles, and I've tended to not really use them all that much. But with quite a few new ones being released in the game of late, I wanted to try and find a use for them. So I devised the Hypercar run. This is going to be a blast with some of the world's fastest road cars. Now, we're not including complete track-only specials like the 599XX and the FXXK and all that sort of thing. They're not going to be. Their car has to be road legal, although they are going to be monsters. So we're starting off with the GTA Spano here. 912 horsepower. In this. This is the, technically speaking, slowest car that will run down this stage. So the vehicles are being run in their reverse PI order. So the lowest PI car, the GTA Spano here, is going to be the first one to take on the stage. And yes, that has 912 horsepower. 900 torque, weighs just under 3,200 pounds. So we are talking some beastly machinery. Now, the road that we are using is around the top of the Horizon 4 map. It is fast, it is unforgiving, and perhaps in some ways a bit more importantly, this is going to be a test of not only the car's outright pace, but it's going to have to deal with all sorts of nastiness. It's kind of almost a test of usability. How easy are these cars to push to their limits? Because there are bumps. There's one there on the inside. You see the Spano lift the wheels up. Across there, there's another big bump down here. If you hit it slightly wrong, there's a big jump for the Spano with the back end letting go. And there will be traffic. There will be cars that have to be dealt with as we head through a nasty chicane. And while it is mostly fast, so the first split it's a 41.1 for the GTA. Now, this is kind of just setting the benchmark along the way. Yeah, this course is fast on the most part. Average speeds are probably well over the 120, 140 mile an hour mark. There are still a couple of nastier sections where it is going to test the vehicles. Pretty much, as we're now heading towards the last ditch blast to the finish line. It's almost flat out the entire way here until the final corner, where the high grip cars will get away with flat out. The cars like the Spano, perhaps not quite so much. It's close with the Spano, just a little tap on the brakes, no massive air brake for the car through there. But the Spano has got one of the most impressive movable aero parts in that air brake. It really is. It really is a big air dam that goes at the back of this one when you stamp on the brakes. A 16.57 is the benchmark that the GTA will set, and there was a little bit of a celebratory burnout as well. Up next from Porsche, we have the 918 Spider, 887 horsepower in this, slightly less than the Spano, slightly less torque as well at 829. I mean, we're still talking huge figures, and it is a considerably heavier car, 3,700 pounds, but the Porsche has an advantage. It's all-wheel drive. Now, this is not a very, very tight and twisty road. We're not on dirt, for an example. However, all-wheel drive helps get that 918 off the line very nicely indeed. There's no time wasted spinning the wheels that we will see certainly with some of the more powerful cars in. I say more powerful cars in, but yeah, there's no time wasted. And you get that little bit of composure. You get that little bit of safety when you're coming out some of the slow corners. You can just jump on the throttle. And if, for example, you need to put a wheel across the dirt, as the Porsche does, keeping out of the way of some traffic, then you can also get away with that as well. The jumps, a little bit of a bump for the rear corner of the Porsche. Nothing too terrible going on in all of this. Now, this section here, some of the real high downforce cars can be taken nearly flat out. The Porsche cannot quite make it. As we hit the first split, it is a second and a half up on the Spano. Now, we saw the Spano running a wheel a little out wide on the grass through there. The Porsche very, very close to the edge of the road. Again, the Porsche, you can dive it across the grass a little bit. It's actually a slight bit too deep into that next corner. There's a wheel on the dirt on the exit, but no real harm done for the Porsche. Now, this is the final slow corner on the stage. Nicely done. No running wide for the 918 here, and then we are flat through this next section, 150 odd miles an hour down here. One more corner to go, really. It's the fast right hand of the Porsche. Is a little lift through there up towards the line, 180 miles an hour across the line for the Porsche. 113.8 will put the 918 into the lead, some 2.7 seconds faster than we saw from the Spano. Well, I always call it the Spano. Just go with it. So there we have it. The Porsche will take the lead here. It's a sizable margin. You know, it's not a bad time from the Spano. The 918 is always likely to enjoy this course a little bit more. Well, it's a course about almost accessibility of the hypercars. Yeah, the Porsche's all-wheel drive system is quite nice, shall we say. It's quite nice to drive, so that is now the new benchmark. Speaking of all-wheel drive cars, up next we have an entry from Lamborghini. It is the Veneno. Not to everyone's tastes, and I can perfectly understand that. I do like the Veneno, however. Power-wise, it's possibly the least powerful car, actually, in this at 740 horsepower. It only has 508 torque. That's really not all that much whatsoever. Weight-wise, it is slightly lighter than the 918 at 3,370 pounds. It looks bonkers, sounds fantastic, and drives really, really well. The Veneno has a huge amount of grip. Again, we've got this all-wheel drive safety in the Lamborghini, which means you can really hammer it around some of these corners, and there's just a lot of grip in this car. It isn't anywhere near as fast as the Spano through that, or down towards that first section, but it can carry the corner speed. Again, not too much in the way of fear. A little bit of an awkward positioned Fiesta for the Lamborghini to have to deal with, and that involves a slight jump and a little bit of a bump on the old telephone wire posts, whatever they are, for the poor Lamborghini, but it gets through it no problem, and this is where the Veneno can make up some time, is it's just got the grip and it's up on the 918. Despite being considerably a bit down in power and torque and whatnot, it's of a second faster than the Porsche into that first split, and it's through this section here. This is where the Lamborghini is very fast. It's got the grip, it gets out of the way of a Fiesta no problem. Thankfully the Fiat is a little too far away to have any impact through that corner. It's a tiny bit wide from the Lamborghini running onto this back straight. Now it won't get to the same speeds we've seen from some of the other cars. It's still very quick, let's not forget here. Easy flat out through that final corner and across the line. It goes even faster than the Porsche. We're down into a 112.6. I say it won't quite have the same top end as some of the cars. It was still going pretty fast, and because it can be flat and closer to flat through corners, it maintained its momentum pretty well. And that puts the Veneno to the top of the table. I'm quite surprised to see the Lamborghini so far ahead of that Porsche, in all honesty. But there we go. It's just a much easier car to push very, very hard down a stage like this where there's a little bit of unpredictability thrown in for good luck. Up next, we're back to the rear-wheel drive cars. The Pagani Huayra BC is the next contender. Same amount of power as the Veneno, actually, at 740. Does have considerably more torque at 737, and it's lighter. I mean, this is a track version pretty much of the Huayra. You know, it's only £2,600, which does make it one of the lighter vehicles that would run down here. And with the Huayra, of course, you get all of the fancy movable aero parts. Sadly, we don't have the Zenvo with the wobbly wing. I would love to have the Zenvo with the wobbly wing. We do not have access to that one, but the Huayra has its own little system. Of course, you won't quite appreciate the front flaps from this camera angle, but you will see the back movable aero working hard to get the car around the course. It's not quite as dramatic in some ways as the Spano's air brake, but it is quite interesting, quite a fascinating thing to watch at work on the Huayra. So as we come up through these first corners, nothing too terrible for the Pagani. It's not an ideal place for that Volkswagen. A big jump. In fact, the biggest jump we've seen from a car for that Pagani. Just puts it out a smidge wide, which isn't quite so helpful as we head up towards the first split. It's going to be down on the likes of the Lamborghini and the Porsche. It's a little bit too deep through the next corner. It's a second away from that Lamborghini. Now it is likely to be, again, it's going to be a bit faster, accelerating through these next sections. Fire spits its way out of that fantastic little exhaust system we have on the Pagani, and it's struggling to quite carry the speed through these corners we saw from the Lamborghini, and now it has got its chance to shine with that straight line speed. It is accelerating nicely. It's up to 175 miles an hour for the final corner, and we are across the line. It's not enough. It's not enough from the Huayra. 114.66 will not do the job. In fact, it puts the Pagani down in third place. Not very far away at all, really, all things considered, from that 918. And it does beat the Spano by a couple of seconds. The all-wheel drive cars with that little bit more consistency, that little bit easier to push, basically, around the circuit, around that particular stage, will keep them ahead. From McLaren, we have got the P1, 903 horsepower going on with this car. That's a lot of power now going on in the McLaren. 664 torque, and the weight, 3,300 pounds. We're going to see quite similar figures from a lot of these cars, especially, you know, bear in mind these hybrid hypercars have got a heavier kind of battery system and so on. The McLaren did have some weather issues. It got foggy and it did not want to shift. So this is slightly less than ideal for the P1. It is safe to say. While it isn't pouring it down with rain, we don't have a huge amount of standing water. Visibility was severely limited as Mini sneaks its way out of the fog up towards this next corner we go. It's not been too bad on the bumps with the McLaren. It's a little bobbling around, but nothing too terrible. I shall be honest, the P1 not my favourite driving of the hypercars. Between the fog and the, well, something not quite being in the best of places, it has not had the best of first sectors. In fact, it's down by 2.7 seconds. That is quite a long way down. It is quite a long way down indeed on the rest of the competition as we head through these next corners. This one, it's caught a few cars out already here. It's easy to be just a little bit too wide like that. And again, McLaren cannot carry the same speed we saw from the Veneno. It just cannot get turned in quite as nicely as we now head down the back straight. It is the flat-out jaunt. It's way faster than the Veneno in terms of top end, and it's almost flat around the final corner. A little bit of a wobble. It loses a bit more time on the final sector, but not quite as bad as the first one. It's a 16.09 for the P1, a 3.4 second, almost 3.5 second down on that Veneno. It does beat the GTA Spano. As I said, weather conditions did not help the P1, most definitely, but it also struggled a bit more down that course. I think with slightly kinder traffic and slightly more visibility, it would have been a lot closer to the Huayra. But honestly, I think the Huayra just drove nicer of the pair of them. Speaking of the Holy Trinity, well, it's time for the third and final contender from that little group. The LaFerrari is here to tackle the hypercar run. While there are a great many more hypercars than just the offerings from Porsche, McLaren and Ferrari, we couldn't do this without having a go with all three of them. The LaFerrari, the highest PI of the lot. It's only a little bit more than, about 4 PI higher than the McLaren P1. 963 horsepower going on in this one, 660 torque, and it is lighter, the lightest of the big hybrid ones at 3,000 pounds. Generally considered the fastest of the three when it comes to Forza games, certainly from my experience. We're expecting some good things from the Ferrari. The fog had cleared. Perhaps the Italian team were busy trying to scupper the McLaren, who knows. Not too bad on the bumps either through this section, maybe a slightly different line for the Ferrari. It's a big chuck sideways though across the second one for the car. Gets away with it, enough grip on the landing. Now a bit of a tap on the brakes through here. Watch the Fiat as we head towards the next corner, and it's up. It's up on the Lamborghini. We're half a second ahead of the Veneno. Let's not forget, this thing is rear-wheel drive. This is a good showing from the LaFerrari. Had to slightly change minds halfway through that on the approach to that corner, keep out of the way of a traffic car. Now, will we see more problems for a vehicle up here? No, the LaFerrari nicely through that section, and now we have again, it's that flat-out jaunt towards the finish line. Don't end up in the back of the Mercedes. We're up to 170, 180 mile an hour mark as we head towards the final corner. A little bit of a lift for the Ferrari, almost in the fence, and it's across the line. It lost a little bit of time in the final sector to the Lamborghini. It won't matter too much. It will go fastest only by a quarter of a second, a tiny fraction for the LaFerrari. It takes the top spot away from that Veneno. It comfortably beats the 918 and the McLaren P1. An impressive run, an impressive showing from that Ferrari indeed. Yeah, a nice car to drive. As I said, it was kind of expected it would probably be the fastest of the three, and definitely of the three, the one that I would want to take on that sort of road. However, McLaren have a chance to fire back immediately with the Senna. Now, we know this is an absolutely ridiculous car, this one. There is no doubt about it. 789 horsepower. It might be less than the P1 and under 600 torque. it is definitely less powerful than that P1, but considerably lighter at £2,800, and well, it sticks to the road. It's designed as a no-compromise track machine that just about can be driven on the road. This was one of the favourites, really, going into this. It is likely to be quick. Yes, it's rear-wheel drive. It doesn't quite have that same safety of the all-wheel drive vehicles, but that being said, it is immensely grippy, and even with unhelpful traffic positions through this first section, it was mighty quick. I mean, it's dodging in and out of traffic at 130 miles an hour plus, no problems whatsoever for the Senna. A little bit of a bump, again, nothing that the car can't deal with. Now, we have not seen many cars be able to get as close to flat out through there as the Senna, and indeed it's going quickly. Again, it's still not that much up on the Veneno. That goes to show how quick, oh, the Ferrari, sorry. Goes to show how quick the Ferrari was through that first section to only be 0.4 of a second faster. That's the sort of place where we might well see the Senna start to extend its lead. It won't have the very highest top speed. It's not about it. It's all about grip. So down here, we may not be seeing really the very, very fastest of speeds, but it can keep... It can grip the circuit, grip the road with these sort of speeds, flat out through the final corner, no problems. 187 miles an hour across the line for the Senna. I mean, that is absolutely flat through the final corner, no problems at all for the car. We're into the 111s. A 111.2 puts it a second and a bit down the road from the LaFerrari. In some ways, I'm not surprised to see the Senna to the top. In some ways, I'm kind of surprised the LaFerrari got as close. And, you know, the Veneno is still only a second and a half down. There's some good showings from some of the cars. The Senna is mighty, though. I mean, that had some really, really mean traffic going on at the start, and it didn't care. It's so grippy. So grippy. Our next contender, my favourite of the current crop of hypercars, and my favourite by a considerable margin. It is the Apollo IE. 780 horsepower in this, 560 torque. Make it quite similar stats in some regards to the Senna. It's slightly lighter, but only by about £50. But, I mean, look at it. It's bonkers and brilliant. It's brilliantly bonkers in purple carbon fibre. There is so many different shapes going on. I absolutely love it. And it is also a pretty damn good car to drive. We don't have big flappy movable aero going on with this one. Just a massive wing that's kind of bolted onto the roof somehow. I don't ask too many questions about any of that as the Apollo heads through these first couple of corners. A bit of a twitch mid-turn, and it's a big jump for the IE. Unhelpful Mazda positioning through the next corner. Not really, again, much like the Senna, barely affected by that jump now towards the fast chicane. The Apollo also has to have a little bit of a lift for all of that. Just a teensy bit twitchy as we head through the first split. It's slightly down on that Senna. It's quite along the lines, quite similar times to the LaFerrari through that first. In fact, probably a little bit down on the LaFerrari through that first sector, but it's very, very close to all of that. Now, the corner's been catching vehicles out all day. Still a slight bit twitchy from the Apollo. It's nicely done for the car. It's slightly drizzling, nothing too terrible in terms of weather for the IE, and we will be flat all the way down here. Again, struggling, let's say struggling for top speed, not quite as fast as some we've seen, but it's still going to be 170 plus across the line. It's a good final sector. In fact, the final sector almost on par with that McLaren Senna. Really didn't lose very much until about 10th down. It's a 112.1 for the Apollo, and it looks damn good doing it. That'll put it into second place. We are just about 0.3 faster than the LaFerrari. But yeah, not quite up there. Not quite up there with the Senna. Yeah, the Apollo had a little bit, everything's had a little bit of nasty traffic in places along the way. The Apollo is a very good car, though. Again, we know how unbelievably good the Senna is. So to have got as close as that, it's pretty damn good going. Now we start bringing out the big guns. And I mean the real big guns. From Koenigsegg, the 1-1. What a monster of a car this one is. The second most powerful vehicle that we will have... Oh, no, it's equal most powerful vehicle, actually. 1,341 horsepower. Oh, it might not quite be because we've got something else coming up. 1,000 torque. It's under 3,000 pounds, this car. It is, well, it's notorious for having the power-to-weight ratio of, well, 1-to-1, pretty much. A brutal machine, this one. However, the concerns for this is usability. Because, yes, there is so much power. I mean, we're up to 194 miles an hour before we really have to start braking, which is way quicker than anything else that has run down the course. But there's no traction control, no stability control allowed on any of these cars. If things go wrong with this, they tend to go wrong big, and it's a large two-wheeled moment for the car. Are we going to have any issues on the jump? It's a little bit. Again, rain pouring down for this one. Not really helping. It also doesn't really do much on Horizon 4. Doesn't really hinder unless it's completely soaked the road, which it hasn't all that much. Through the first split, we are slightly down on that Senna by only 0.6 of a second. Now, where this car is going to struggle is getting its power down out of the slower corners. It's very easy to spin the wheels and lose a little bit of time, as we see. It goes sideways. It's not the worst sliding about you will ever see from the car. Next corner, it can't quite carry the same speed we saw from the Apollo in all of that, but now it's got going, it will really, really fly. We're up to the 200-mile-an-hour mark through the final corner. There's a very unhelpful placed Audi, and it's across the line for the egg. A 111.7, despite an unhelpful Audi, it was gaining time in that final sector. It is a fast run, a very fast run from the car. It'll go into second place for the 1-1. Still half a second down. Again, not helped by a little bit of inconvenient traffic along the way, but trying to deal with that is more difficult in the Koenigsegg. It's just that little bit tougher to get that turned into some of the corners, whereas the Senna will change direction instantly and you don't have to worry about it sliding around. Now, our next vehicle is the most powerful car. I forgot about this one. There's just ridiculous horsepower. The Rimac C2... 1,887 horsepower is what we've got here. 1,700 torque. I mean, these are stupid numbers in a road car. It is the heaviest car, though, as well, at 4,300 pounds. The all-electric monster is an interesting prospect. Now, it only has 2 gears. You've got one to get off the line, and then you stick it in second and don't have to worry about it for the rest of the time. Top end? Unbelievable. However, handling leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, this is as fast, if not perhaps even a little faster, than the Koenigsegg that we just ran around here. But it doesn't half make it difficult around the corners. It's big and it's heavy. It is all-wheel drive, which gives it some chance almost. Rear-wheel drive one of this would just not survive. You simply cannot get it turned into the corners like you can anything else. It outdrags just about everything. It's sort of 100 to 180 is just ridiculous, but it is struggling on this stage. It is down just over 2 seconds at the first split. It can use its power in some parts of this course, but it really can't use its power through a lot of it here. You've got to bide your time going through the corners. It will fly towards this next turn, then you've got to jump on the brakes to make sure you don't end up visiting some of the British countryside here. And then we're onto the power once more for this run. It might get the highest top speed of any car, but you'd have to get on the brakes for the next corner. In fact, it can't, because you have to be so early on the brakes through here to just try and survive, and it's across the line. A 1:15.3 for the Rimac. It's 4 seconds down on the leaders. Perhaps not a big surprise. A ferociously fast car in terms of top speed, but too much of a handful. It actually loses out to the Huayra BC. It does narrowly beat the McLaren P1. It's about a second faster than the GTA Spano, but it is too heavy and just too difficult to drive. Pretty much along that course, it's a real struggle to get it turned into any of the corners. But once you've got it going, God, does it fly. Up next, we're back to Koenigsegg with the Agera RS, officially the fastest car in the world in terms of top speed. Same engine that we find in the 1-to-1, the 1,341 horsepower, 1,000 torque engine. It is slightly heavier than the similar car that ran earlier. We're already talking about 100 pounds heavier. So it'd be interesting to see how these two would fare against each other. Now, they are both fairly similar in regards to ferocious speed, ferocious top end, but it's how difficult are they to drive down here. It's another 190 mile an hour plus towards the first corner. I mean, we're still holding 130, 140 miles an hour through there, and you can't, well, you don't want to get bounced around too much. You can't afford to start sliding the car. That's when you'll lose a lot of time. And here we're talking 4th gear quarter, 130 miles an hour, and still the Agera wants to be going sideways. That's tough. That is tough. It's a big slide out of the chicane. We're down at the first of the splits. In fact, we're a second down. You also got to bear in mind that these cars do lose a little bit of time off the launch. While the launch isn't the biggest part here, everything is going from a standing start. So these rear-wheel drive monsters are going to lose some time to some of the all-wheel drive cars, or some of the rear-wheel drive cars that get off the line better. We've not got any traction control. It's a little wide for the Agera, having to dodge another traffic car here, but then comes the power in this. More manageable than we saw from the Rimac. It's going to be another car. It's up to 210 miles an hour towards the final turn, and we're across the line. It's 112.65 in the end for the Agera. A monstrously quick run down that back straight, but it's not quite as fast as the 1-1. It's still a very, very good time from the car, but not as fast as the 1-1. It goes into a 6th place. It's very close. Well, 3rd to 6th is very close indeed from the Apollo down to that Agera RS. We're talking hundredths away from the Veneno, but interestingly, the Veneno, more accessible speed. The Agera RS would obliterate it, does obliterate it down the straights, but the Veneno was that little bit nicer. And our final contender, well, we can't do one of these without giving the Ultima a try. Admittedly, you might not count this as a hypercar, more of a kit car, track car monster, but it is road legal, and it would be remiss of us not to have a go with it, because the Ultima Evolution has 1,020 horsepower, 920 torque, and weighs just 2,100 pounds. It's silly. In fact, there is a newer, even faster version that was announced, at Goodwood actually, this year. Sadly, we don't have that in Forza, but this thing is unbelievable. It beats just about everything, in theory at least, in terms of being a road car for sheer raw pace. But can it still do it down this road? Because, of course, with this much power, this little weight, dealing with traffic and dealing with bumps, would the Ultima be too hard to drive? It's slipping and sliding a little bit through this first section. The bumps aren't the kindest. We're up to 180, it's almost 190 before this chicane here. That's almost unheard of for anything. We're through the chicane and it's going faster. We are 0.6 of a second up on our current leader, which is pretty damn good going for the Ultima, although that's also not a bad showing for the Senna, all things considered. The Ultima's stuck on the road, is just about getting it all together towards this next crucial corner. It's a little wide, and again, not quite carrying as much speed as we saw from the Apollo, although it doesn't really matter when you've got acceleration like this from the Ultima. Will it go faster than the Koenigseggs down here? Not quite. It's 200 miles an hour just. The change of direction through that final corner is absurd, and it's across the line at a 108.7. It's 2.5 seconds clear in the end. At the top of the table, it made massive gains through that final sector. It looked like the Senna was going to be close after the first split, but that final sector from the Ultima was just too much. It still has the grip, it still has the composure to absolutely wipe the floor with everything, really, down this, because 2nd to 8th is covered by about the same gap. 1st to 2nd is covered with. The Ultima Evo will take victory. The McLaren Senna takes 2nd ahead of the 1-1. The Apollo gets 4th, which I think is a very good showing from that car. Still be the one I would have out of all of them. The Ferrari LaFerrari will take 5th ahead of the Veneno. The Agera RS in 7th ahead of the 918. The Huayra BC in 9th. The Rimac, that gets 10th. So much speed, but so little control ahead of the slightly unlucky P1. And the GTA Spano rounds out the table. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, a goodbye.